Hello, and welcome to today's Art at Noon talk on community participatory photography with Laura Sherwood. I'm Kristen Butler, Director of Programs here at the Delaplane Arts Center. Before I hand things over to Exhibitions Manager Corey Fry, I wanted to mention that if you enjoy our programs, check out our website to see everything else we have going on, including exhibitions, classes, workshops, and our gift gallery. The web address is delaplane.org. And now, Corey Fry.
Hi, everyone. Really glad to be with you all today. I'm really excited about our talk. I want to let you know really quick about our current exhibitions at the Delaplane. So come on out and see our shows. We have a couple of solo exhibitions, as well as our national juried exhibition, which is, there's about 60 or so artists from all over the country. We even have an artist from Poland who's showing a painting in the show. So come on out and check those out. Our hours at the Delaplane are Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 and Sundays from 11 to 5. Also, I wanted to let you know that if you're interested in more information about our classes and our coming summer camps that we're scheduling and workshops, all that information is up on our website. So go to our website, delaplane.org, and check those things out. Without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker today. So we're going to be talking to Laura Sherwood, and I'm going to read to you her bio here real quick, and we'll jump right in. Laura Sherwood joins us to discuss the Photovoice Empowerment Project and her research into empowering communities and organizations through visual storytelling to communicate effectively and influence social change. Ms. Sherwood is the founder of the Transformative Arts Project, a nonprofit that utilizes art and storytelling to amplify the voice of underrepresented communities. She's a PhD candidate at Fielding Graduate University, and her research includes an in-depth look at photovoice, artivism, and arts-based research. With a background in photography, she incorporates documentary elements into her dissertation, using both video and photography from her ethnographic study of two female activists using art to mobilize social change in India. She spent most of her life in Hawaii and previously worked at the University of Hawaii as the director of the LGBTQ+ Center, where she's worked to raise awareness and build allyship. She's also worked in community development with women and youth struggling with addiction. Laura believes in the transformative power that visual storytelling and the arts have in reaching a larger society's hearts and minds, acting as an agent for social change. She has two children just over the age of 20 and is a cat and a coffee lover. Please, everybody, welcome our speaker today, Laura Sherwood. Laura, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you for having me here at the Delaplane. It's an honor to share with you all. So we're going to talk about Photovoice and my experience. So today, just to give a little highlight of what we'll talk about, I just want to thank you for coming and listening to this talk. I really appreciate it, and for being invited to speak. So I'm just going to share a little bit about my journey. I'm going to tell you what Photovoice is and who benefits from Photovoice. And if you have any questions, lots of questions, just throw them in the chat and we'll get to them after. So without that, I'm just gonna move along. So for me, my interest started in humanitarian photography. I worked as a photographer. I had a studio in Hawaii, and then I traveled to India with a friend just on a whim. And we went up into the Himalayas where the Dalai Lama is. And I met this monk, Bagdro. And Bagdro was very passionate about activism, about the work that he was doing, because he had been imprisoned and tortured and all these things. His story was just like so profound. So he shared his story with me, and he had a book, and we became friends. And this was the first time, I think, for me, that I had ever really looked at in any kind of activism. I lived in Hawaii. It was very, very mellow life. I didn't really get into social political things. So Bagdro kind of introduced me into wanting to use my photography to impact some sort of change, raise awareness. So that's where it kind of started. And he's got a beautiful story. You can, he does these beatboxing, and he's just this amazing individual. He's very passionate about his work. So if you want to, you can always find him on by Googling. Along with Bagdro, I was introduced to other community members. This young little girl on the side was Aja, and she, you know, she would be sent out to the streets to beg for money and beg for anything, and she was just the sweetest little thing. And she really, it's kind of like up in the Himalayas, it's like they would send the children out to beg for money. And even though I saw her one time all cleaned up, dressed, going to school, you know, but this was when I first saw her as a Westerner coming, and, you know, they pull at your heartstrings. And so, you know, we had a relationship, and I took her to pizza, and she learned how to say pizza, and she taught me her name. And then the Tibetan elders, what really pulled me to them was that they had walked across the Himalayas. Like, they walked across the Himalayas from Tibet, which is a treacherous walk, to follow the Dalai Lama. So these little bits of things like really like opened my eyes about some of the social and political things that were happening that made me want to use my photography in that way. Sorry. So for me, what happened was I went back to Hawaii. I had all these amazing pictures. I had all these amazing stories. And I thought I would go back to India and do a photo documentary of the Tibetan elders and Bagdro. And so I came back with all this passion, and I shared it with people, but people they weren't there. They didn't have the same passion. They didn't buy into it as much as I did. So I decided I needed to go back to school so that I could learn to write grants and do these programs that I wanted to do. And so fast forward 12 years later, I'm in graduate school, and I'm looking at ways that art and activism merge. And I kept coming across this Photovoice. So I started doing a lot of research on Photovoice, anything and everything I could find. And Photovoice led me to go to London to go to this intensive Photovoice training. So that's where you see this happening. And so when I got there, I started to learn, what is participatory photography and why is it important? Participatory photography is something that uses the community, engages the community in the process of understanding key issues, research, different ways of, instead of, say, me going into a community as a researcher, and just interviewing people and getting their knowledge and bringing it back and making all my own assumptions and creating a story about it. It's them telling their own story. So it's really kind of that decolonizing research, decolonizing the way that we take from communities without hearing their voice or make assumptions. So that's where it's rooted. It's rooted in just kind of, getting the participation of the community within the process. So Photovoice is all about bringing the community together. And so it's about looking at your stakeholders, and it has that social and emotional kind of underpinnings, and it brings in the research, it brings in community awareness, it brings in advocacy. But programs are really intended to raise awareness, to create policy change, to create community awareness, whatever the situation is or the issue that's trying to be addressed. Many projects have been done with youth homeless. There have been lots of refugee projects. I mean, there's been projects all over the world that have been done. And so the first thing is identifying stakeholders, like who are the stakeholders? And it's not just, say, me wanting to go into a community and do, say, a Photovoice project with a group of youth. First, it's like, who are the stakeholders? Like, if I do this project with the youth, where is that going to go? And how is that going to benefit them telling their stories? And how is that going to create change or awareness? So really building the stakeholders and getting those together, whether it's policymakers, leaders, whoever the organizations are, that kind of have that power to create change. So that's the first step. So when I looked at Photovoice Projects here in Maryland, there's been over 1,400 projects done in Maryland. And then of course in the US, there's a lot, and then India, and then projects that have been done all over the world. You can see that there's a significant amount of projects. So there's, it is a research it's been done in research, academics, it's been done in communities. So it's a process that really engages communities, has been found to be very beneficial in understanding the needs of communities and getting to hear their experiences, because sometimes we can go in, like I said, and have assumptions, but not really understand what are those needs of the community, because we don't understand what are the struggles and the challenges that they're facing. So Photovoice, a typical project, goes through bringing the community together. It's a series. It's done over a period of, some projects have been done in 6 weeks. They've gone into multiple years. Photovoice in London has done projects in Africa that have taken, 10-year projects. So it's really about engaging. The longer the project, the more, of course, you get to engage with the community and understand. So it's bringing those community members together and building those relationships is really important, and getting them to take pictures, to tell their stories, and to share that with policymakers. So this is kind of just the quick and dirty how Photovoice is, the exhibits, and what that looks like in community. So after a project, which I'm going to go into more detail, after a project is really, the goal is to share it with the community. And this has been done in many ways. There's been traveling exhibits, there's been, pop-up exhibits, there's been exhibits done in coffee shops, in town halls, and in city halls, and just everywhere and anywhere that you can get people to come and kind of engage with this. So this is a typical way that it's done. So, and this is another style of Photovoice, how it's done to, reach funders, stakeholders, raise awareness, and empower the community's voice by empowering the stories that they're telling. And the thing about Photovoice, it's not just about the stories that they're telling. The photography is the images that they tell. It's kind of like they're the metaphor to get the stories to come out, because it equals the playing field of say those power dynamics. So it allows them to communicate in a way that's universal. So using that universal tool of communicating through the images, and then telling a story of what those images mean to them, kind of can create the connection, rather than whether it being language barriers, whether it being anything that you can get, because they can either write down the narrative, or we can dictate it, and somebody else can write it down for them. So in 2018, I went to India with Photographers Without Borders to study ethical storytelling for change. And Photographers Without Borders partners with local NGOs to help bring in outside photographers to then go into these programs and learn from them, to learn about the communities. But what they do that's really unique is that they teach individuals like myself to go in and be ethical storytellers, to go into these communities as an outsider, and how does that, how do you engage as an outsider, rather than just going in, with our, with the ethnocentric lens of thinking that, I know something, but it's really learning from the community. So the reason I went with Photographers Without Borders, because Danielle, the founder, is one of my my participants in my research, looking at the 2 females. She's one of those individuals. So Sambali empowers women. So they have these centers. So it was created by an individual whose family, one family, created this whole program that empowers women and children and communities. So, and I say here that that Photovoice has given, and I cross that out because we talk about a photo voice as giving voice, but it's really about amplifying the voice, because individuals have a voice. We're just creating the space and the opportunities for them to share their voice rather than somebody speaking for them or about them. So Photovoice was created by scholars Carolina Wing and Marianne Burris, and it was done in China. When they were part of this big Ford Foundation funding project. And what came out of that with all the different components was that the photos and the stories of that were the most significant thing that came out to understanding the community needs and understanding what was happening in the communities. So Photovoice, like I've shared, is a practice-based development of knowledge. It shares the individual stories through the communities, and the photography engages. The photography is the part that engages their voice, that gets them to start thinking and looking at their communities in a different way. So you would go in with a question of, say what are some of the challenges or strengths that you see in this community, in your own community. And then you would have conversations, and then the individual would go out and they would take images of things that represent certain stories to them, certain experiences, just the metaphors. So then Photovoice has three main goals. So it's to enable people to record and reflect their concerns, to promote critical dialogue and knowledge, and to influence change. So this is the original purpose of Photovoice. But it's as the years have gone, Photovoice has kind of been sometimes it's been taken into different contexts and used as just kind of they do photo elicitation is another way of just having people share about their photos and kind of do storytelling that way. But the traditional photo voice was always created to increase that awareness, community awareness, policy change, and for the advocacy. But it's been done in many contexts of just kind of bringing in empowerment, bringing in community, building community, giving youth the opportunity to share their experiences and have their voices heard. So Photovoice can help, create that space for people whose voices who are not traditionally heard. Like so many times decisions are made, policies are made without ever considering what are the needs and what does the community say? Because sometimes they'll just, a policymaker will just think that this is what needs to be done, and the policy's made, the community has no idea and has no opportunity to share their experiences. And so this is also like in this image, I kind of captured this image of insider, outsider, like who has access. And that's always a challenge, right? Who has access to resources? Who has access to being able to communicate their needs, their experiences? So Photovoice puts the cameras into the hands of the community and allows them to kind of document their story, to share their experiences, and as I said, to help influence that, raise awareness, impact community change, share their needs. And again, it amplifies their voices, empowering participants to be reporters, documenting their own lives. And it also allows them to participate in that decision-making process, which is really important when we're looking at building equity and allowing individuals to kind of take ownership of their lives and their stories. So what happens is when you do a Photovoice project, you bring in all the images, and these are the questions that kind of bring out the stories. So the stories that happen is, what do you see here? So you ask them to look at their images. What's really happening here? How does this relate to our lives? What does this situation concern or strength exist? Why does it exist? And what can we do to improve the situation? So there's a systematic way of going about going in. You don't just give people cameras and, tell them to go take pictures and expect that that's going to make any change or empower them. It's a really an engaging process that's facilitated over a period of time to build the relationship, to get them to understand how to tell a narrative, how to tell a story through the images. So in India, so this is where we're going to talk about who benefits, right? So in India, there's a lot of poverty, and women are often very marginalized and have little say in their lives. And if we take it even further below or further, yeah, so the Dalit community is considered, if you know anything about India, there's a caste system. And so Sambali Trust created these empowerment centers all over in these very, very poor villages, and started bringing women and children in and giving them education, giving them skills to help empower them in their communities and elevate their social status. So again, there's that boy girl, where boys in previously, boys were educated and girls were not educated, and so there is still that, the value of educating a son to a value of educating a daughter, because the daughter's going to go get married and she doesn't need to be educated, as whereas a son, he's going to provide for the family, so it's more important. So there's that systemic issue there, but it is starting to change, but bringing it into smaller villages, because there's so many rural villages that are still, still living in these times of these are the traditional roles. So again, in India, there is there's still a large percentage of child marriage, and so that's another issue that's faced. So how does Photovoice help with these issues? Is Photovoice raises awareness to the communities, like these issues that they're experiencing, bringing these issues to the forefront, bringing it to policymakers, and in showing the things that are happening within communities. And also educating communities of understanding, because when you're trying to create social change, it's inside the community that it's the leaders in the community that need to inspire the change, rather than an outsider coming in to create that change. So of course, education is key. And if you educate a boy, you educate an individual. But if you educate a girl, you educate a nation. So it's really, really, the more that girls are getting educated, the more that social change is happening, the more that they are becoming elevated and having more rights and having more say. And of course, if you educate a girl, then the generations will continue to be educated. So again, they provide the skills, the training to girls and women. And this is just an empowerment center where the women are learning sewing and creating and just learning together. And so for me, when I was in India, you come in and it's such a different culture, right? So of course you're going to have those my own views of the way things should be, the way they shouldn't be. But it's different when you come in with that, like doing an ethnographic case study, right? Is looking at that community, observing them, and trying to keep my own biases in the background. But it's not always easy when you think that, especially looking at a feminist lens, you want everybody to be empowered, but it's a different type of empowerment. It's looking at it culturally, like what does cultural empowerment mean to them? What does empowerment mean to the women? Not what I think it means, but what does it mean to them, and what would be empowering to them? So those are the voices and the stories that you get to when you're in these environments, and you start to lower your own my own biases and my own assumptions. So again, Photovoice helps people who are often ignored, and allows them to gain confidence, skills, tell their own stories, and really impact issues that are important to them, rather than the outsider saying these are the issues. It's the community. So then again, this is the path to Photovoice. So I talked about what Photovoice is, who benefits. So it starts out again with the learning about Photovoice, getting stakeholders, getting your community participants, coming together and taking pictures, having conversations about those pictures. And then again, being able to create the themes, create the narratives that go along with the images, and then curating the exhibit or however they want to present it, and then sharing that with the larger communities is always the key. So, and then there's always a call to action, like, so what is the change that individuals are trying to make? What is it, whether they're trying to create awareness, or they're trying to, get more resources to their community. So it's whatever that is. So the call to action. And right now there's a call to action, of course, in India, because India is facing, and just like so many cases of COVID each day, right? There are like 400,000 cases a day of people who are infected with COVID. So that's a huge call to action right now globally, is to support the communities there. So that would be an incident of like me going through this and saying, then there's the call to action. How can you help? What can you do? So that's an example of what that would look like. And then I just kind of created this short little thing so you can just have an experience in India. So I'll just let you absorb this. And yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. You can contact me if you want to know more about Photovoice, if you want to know more about transformative arts projects. So we're working to use all different forms of arts to empower communities, to raise awareness, to empower individuals. And so feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, so thank you.
Laura, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really fascinating stuff. I have a couple of questions to ask you, but I want to throw this out to anybody watching. You can put your questions for Laura in the chat or in the question and answer box at the bottom of the Zoom of the webinar, and we'll get those over to her. Yeah, Laura, I'm really interested in, I guess where I wanted to first kind of ask you about was if you have any stories or any moments of giving a child or someone a camera before that's never held one, just sort of kind of closing in the technological gap there. I mean, and giving them the freedom to capture a moment seems like such an interesting idea to somebody who's never felt empowered to capture anything in their life. So I wonder if you have any stories or just any ideas about what that looks like.
That's a great question. So that experience was a really fun experience. So we went to one of the empowerment centers where you saw the little girls looking at the images, and they'd never had a camera or taken a picture. And so these are kids that live in like a community living with a lot of other youth that are, because of what their family situation, so they get educated, so they're living in these like boarding home. And so we went in and we started, I tried to do a Photovoice project with them, but they were so excited to just get the camera in their hand. And I was like, okay, go take some pictures of things that really matter to you. And so they just wanted to take pictures of each other. So it was this, they were just so excited to take the portraits and see themselves reflected in this image. And it was, you know, the instant camera. So they were really excited to get to keep it and play with it. And so it was a really fun experience to see them enjoy that. And then in the other empowerment centers where the girls are older, yet giving them the cameras again, they just love to have the camera in their hand. They love taking pictures. When you have the cell phone, they love taking selfies and they love seeing them. So it's for them, it's very exciting and new, you know, and so it's really neat to see them light up and really get excited about it. So that's why I think it's such a great potential to engage communities, regardless of the language barrier, right? Because they all speak Hindi, and I didn't speak Hindi, so it's like, but the camera could allow us to communicate, right? Like they could see their images, they would want to show me things, and so it was seeing it through their eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. I want to read a comment here from Abby in the chat. She just says, thank you. Really value the use and need for participatory photography. Very important to empower a community. Can you share what local NGOs you have worked with, and how did you create partnerships with them to do your projects?
Thank you, Abby. So here, because I'm new to the area, new to Maryland, so I've worked a lot in Hawaii with NGOs, but not here in Maryland. I have I've kind of reached out and connected to the different programs. Right now I'm volunteering at the Community Art Center, and just kind of working on building those relationships to start doing projects here locally, because most of my work has been done globally, internationally, a lot in India, and then again in Hawaii, where I worked with mostly teenage girls, empowering them, the individual women and girls that have been experienced abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, and just using different modes of empowerment of using things that are like theater and different ways for them to experience it, or whether it's through art. So
yeah, she said, sorry, not in Maryland, but worldwide NGOs. By local, I meant communities, not Maryland.
Okay. So of course Simbali Trust is the one that I've worked with. I've worked with some of the Tibetans up in McLeod Ganj. And then I work, one person that I work with very closely is the transgender community. I work with a transgender activist who's my other participant, but I call them co-creators of knowledge. So she has an organization in South India where she works with the communities with art. So she uses art to empower the transgender community, to break down the stigmas, to get their stories out there. So we've been doing a lot of collaboration. Yeah, and then again in Hawaii.
Yeah. I'm curious, I'm an artist and I work with a lot of artists, and there can be this insecurity that comes with being an artist, because you're like, I don't know, you're putting something out there on view for other people. So what I'm getting at with saying that is, I would imagine people that have never felt empowered before, to people that have been told their whole lives that they don't have a voice, maybe not explicitly told that, but at least told that in other ways. Do you ever see a hesitation from people as you're handing that power to them, to a hesitation of like needing to not push on them, hey, you have something to say, you have ideas that can be shown or carried? Is my question making sense?
Yeah, completely. Okay. I think that one thing that you really pointed out that I think is so important about Photovoice is that, you know, coming from as a photography background, right? Having that background in photography, of course, I want the images to be beautiful. But the thing about Photovoice is it's really not about the quality of the image. I mean, I've seen some blurry images. I've seen things that just are very abstract and, you know, the lighting's not right, but it's the message that they share, that whatever that signifies for them,
Mm.
that they can share their story. So it's them, that the images act as that, the agency to create the story, right?
Mm.
So it's not really about the art, and that's the beauty of
Sure.
about all the things that we're doing. It's not about the, because everybody can be an artist, right? Everybody can create something, right? Because that's what art is. It's a creation, and inspiring people to use that ability to communicate their experiences, to communicate this advocacy, to just kind of help them to, you know, tap into themselves and tell their own story, or reflection. Like art can be so therapeutic for communities, for individuals, especially individuals that are very introverted and shy like myself. Like I, you know, for me, I would never go anywhere, but give me a camera, like I could barely go outside, but give me the camera and I can travel the world, because it's like I have that little box that I can hide behind, and it gives me this sense of empowerment. And so I think that's really key. And did that answer, or was there,
No, that's
I think there was more to it, but
no,
maybe.
that's great. I guess the only other thing would be like on an individual level, like just sort of handing somebody a camera who's never shared their had the room to share their opinion or their point of view, and you're saying, all right, show me your point of view.
Well, I
Like,
think it's not really, it's not that cut and dry.
okay,
It's
sure.
more of a process. So you would give them experiences to like play with the camera, to go just kind of like take like a simple thing would be, you know, go find something of the color red, right?
Yeah.
Or go find something that makes you happy. And it's kind of like those little baby steps that get them comfortable in the process of like, how does this image represent anything? Because if I just said, oh, go tell me some of the issues of your community,
Sure.
that might be too far. They don't even know, they don't even think about these things, right? And that's the other thing, is breaking it down in working with local communities, right? So if I'm working with a local community, I'm working with somebody in that community, they're there translating, they're there working with the community, so that it's not, you know, because sometimes language doesn't cross over, like, or my questions are just not something that they think about or understand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That totally makes sense. I love I love that idea of sort of easing people into it and the necessity of that. That totally makes sense. Um, the other question I had was, you know, in some you're empowering people, right? And that sort of means that you are removing power from other places and handing it to them. So I'm curious about any pushback that maybe you would get from local authorities or I don't know, people that want to hold on to power are going to be hesitant to share that power, especially with people that are underrepresented. Um, and so I'm just curious about that.
Right. So that's one of the key important things when you're setting up a photo voice project where you want to intervene in that way. It's really important to get the buy-in of the policymakers, bring them in as part of the project, or the community, the people with the power, right? So the
Yeah.
stakeholders, bring them in. A lot of some of the ethical issues that have happened in projects are, say, NGOs wanting to do a photo voice project or getting funding to do a project from outside. So the thing is that funders often have fund a single project, and they kind of want to steer the narrative
Mm.
to fit their agenda. And that's an issue, because that's really then disempowering. So it's not
Yeah.
empowering, it's disempowering the individuals. And then the other issue is that images are curated, right? So if I'm going in and I'm working with the community, and then I'm telling them what you know, and there's already that power dynamic, right? So I've already have power as an outsider, as a, you know, an activist, a researcher, and so I'm coming in. So there's already a power dynamic. So if I am, oh, I like this picture, or let's talk about that, it kind of changes the dynamic. So I'll give an example of one I experienced myself. So when I went to London and we were doing this photo voice training through Photovoice in London, it was a in-depth, and there was a documentary photographer, and he had worked all over India. And so I felt like him and I worked together in this. We were told to bring images. So I brought all these images from, you know, my first trip to India. And so we were going to create a story, do a narrative of it. And so as we were going through the pictures, he started saying, oh no, this one, this and this tells a better story. And so I was like, okay. So then when we got up there and we presented, and I was like, but that's not the story that I wanted to tell. That wasn't what was important to me. That wasn't my story. That was his story. And what happened there is I saw him as having more experience, you know, being that, so I gave away my power because I thought he knew better. And so that's where being very careful in the process of allowing the individuals to curate their own stories, to curate their own images, and kind of hands off facilitate, which is really hard for anyone, right? And you know, especially if you see an image that you really like and you want that one to be, you know, so it's a challenge of balance, right? So I think that's a really important thing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Um, what do you have on your radar as far as locally? Like, are you thinking, as far as you're doing, as far as thinking towards projects, even in Frederick or in Maryland, or do you have anything you're thinking about working towards, or people that you want to empower in these ways?
Definitely. I mean, I have a ton of projects, but one of them that I'm really passionate, there's two populations, right? So specifically youth, right? And specifically LGBTQ youth, that because they experience so much oppression, so much bullying. I mean, transgender youth are at the highest level for suicide, you know, so there's, and especially with everything that's happening, you know, just kind of around the world and in those situations. And so getting their stories out there and kind of breaking down those stigmas and humanizing them. That's what these projects do, is that if you don't really understand a community and you don't know them, then you kind of, they're just some, you know, other. But when you can engage in their story and you see them in that way, then it can really create that human connection and empathy. So definitely the LGBTQ youth is definitely a community. And of course, individuals of, you know, especially looking at what was happening, you know, in the summer last year, you know, with all Black Lives Matter, and working with individuals of color, that giving, you know, so my vision is to train the trainer, right? So it's not me coming in as an outsider. It's working with the individuals of the communities, training them, facilitating with them, and allowing them to create those spaces that will empower their community. So that's one of the projects that I have envisioned. So
No, that's so great. I'm wondering too, for anybody that would hear your story and hear about these projects and be impassioned to empower other people in the same ways that you have. I wonder if you have any advice about maybe ways to start, or ways to start thinking, maybe experiences, intentional experiences that they can have to sort of fuel that drive maybe a little bit, if you have any advice in that direction.
well, I think whenever we're, you know, so like in the beginning when I first started, right, of getting excited about my, you know, wanting to tell people's stories and empower them, and it's really, that was really about me, right?
Mm,
It wasn't about them. So
sure.
really handing over that power and being able to let others, I think it's really about being able to facilitate and being able to step back and not curate, any kind of situation. So it's really allowing the process, which is really hard in a group dynamic, right? In any group dynamic, there's always personalities and things that happen, but it's just really having that. And it depends what you want to do in that space. Like if you wanted to do a Photovoice project, I think it's really important for people to get trained, because it isn't just like, oh, I'm gonna hand cameras and I'm gonna do this project. And it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of awareness of how to facilitate it, because it is a process, and it's kind of done step by step, to instead of it being, because I've seen lots of research where it's just been, we hand them cameras, and then, the stories are just random, and or there's challenges, and I think those challenges can be mitigated when you have those intentional facilitation and engagement with communities, and kind of, it's just pulling away. Other ways of engaging, I think, is definitely just bringing people together, and people that have similar purpose and passion, and just playing with different things that call to. I mean, the arts world is so amazing. Like everything, we see it in all arts, activism and creating messages that get to the larger communities through art, whether it's music, whether it's murals, whether it's paintings, whether it's poetry. All these are ways that, that can impart messages that otherwise wouldn't be heard, because the larger communities, maybe have a deaf ear to what is going on in those communities.
Oh, that's so great. I'm really appreciative of your time and just sharing your story with us. All this is really fascinating. I'm looking forward to diving a little deeper into things. So thank you so much for your time and sharing with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to everyone who joined our discussion today. While you're on our channel, check out our other videos, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notifications about other videos from the Delaplane. Thanks again for watching.